acknowledge that the traditional custodians of this land never ceded their sovereignty or their authority to any state or corporate entity, not the Australian government and not Radford College. I don't know what to do about that, but I think we should talk about it. I'd also like to thank you all for having me. I feel honoured to be speaking alongside the amazing people who will follow, and I'm privileged that my voice will be heard here today rather than anyone else's. I'm conscious that there are countless others less privileged than myself, for example by their gender, race, or socioeconomic background, who have never had the opportunity to speak in such a forum, even though they have a lot to say about my topic for today, justice. Today I'm going to give you one key message, 2 visions of the future, and 3 ways to think about positive change, and all of that in the next 9 minutes. Wish me luck. Now, if you've ever seen one of these scary and slightly blurry graphs about climate change, you'll know that our climate is already changing with horrific consequences, and that the fossil fuel-dependent economy and society that we have simply cannot go on like this. It is, in a word, unsustainable. But for me, as an activist or active citizen, the question is, how do we get from the mess that we're in now to a world that we'd like to live in, a sustainable one? Well, I'm going to argue, however we get there, it will not be by talking about sustainability. Sustainability might sound like a value, like fairness or justice or equal opportunity. But actually, it's completely value-free. As soon as you start talking about sustainability, you've already sidestepped the question of what it is that we're trying to sustain. The Canberra Centre, democracy, the beef industry, my family, Domino's Pizza, I don't know, what are we sustaining? I think we should talk about justice instead. And to show why, I'm going to give you 2 visions of the future. Picture in your minds the ideal green city of the future. Eco-friendly buildings, high-speed trains, waterways, electric cars, bike lanes, markets and cafes, all organic, and local electricity generation. It's ringed by enormous sea walls to keep the city from being flooded due to sea level rise. Part climate change adaptation, part mitigation, and all beautiful. What's not to like? Well, have a look outside the walls. Our sustainable city is surrounded by enormous slums where desperate millions are struggling. The ocean keeps rising, collapsing their homes, washing away their kids. They try to go bush, but the countryside is dead dry. They try to fish, but the oceans yield jellyfish and plastic. They try to get into the green city, where the rich people live, hoping that they too might be sustained. But the sea walls are closed to them, and the city's private police force has a reputation for brutality. Here's the twist. This first future, the cruel one, is our present. The sustainable city I just described is under construction right now in Lagos, Nigeria, the biggest city in Africa. It's called Eco-Atlantic. 250,000 members of a super-rich plutocracy will make their home inside those walls. Some of the first clients to have pre-purchased office space in Eco-Atlantic are oil and gas companies. The very people most responsible for getting us into the climate crisis will insulate themselves from it, inflicting the cost on the already poor and marginalised. As the sea level rises, 15 million inhabitants of Lagos will be driven increasingly into desperate poverty and conflict, while Eco-Atlantic's residents ride bicycles, catch excellent public transport, and sip hazelnut frappuccinos. This is sustainability according to the cool logic of the market. Green living as a luxury commodity for a privileged few. Now, years ago, when I first read about Eco-Atlantic, I first thought, whoa, Africa's crazy. Thank God things like that don't happen in Australia. But let's take a closer look at Australia. Coal mining capital of the world, very low tax rates, big profits for mining magnates here and overseas. And who is suffering? Aboriginal people and farmers whose lands are being undermined, rural communities torn apart by cycles of boom and bust. And who will suffer into the future? Our Pacific neighbours, who, as sea levels rise, face the destruction of their entire nations. Consider what our government does currently to the relatively small number of people seeking asylum here. Towbacks, abuse inside prisons, deportation. I invite you, even if it's hard, to try and imagine what these governments might do with hundreds of millions of people who are predicted to be displaced by climate-related disasters. Tow them back? Detain them? Or just sink their boats? There are already climate refugees knocking at our doors, and in our continent-sized scale model of eco-Atlantic, we keep building the walls higher and higher. So what do we do about all this? Well, what's certain is that whatever we need to do, it's not what's currently being done in the name of sustainability. Eco-Atlantic, alongside other projects, has won internationally prestigious sustainability awards, including one from Bill Clinton in an awards ceremony with the title, "The Infrastructure of Human Dignity, Protecting the Most Vulnerable." I call bullshit, Clinton. And you can too, with what I call the Sustainable Injustice Test. Next time you come across some kind of sustainability innovation, whether it's the Nishi building in New Acton or Canberra's new light rail line, ask yourself these questions. Who will have access to this? Who is being left out? Who has been empowered or heard, and who has been disempowered or silenced by the process that led to this change? If some people are left out of this sustainable solution, what will sustain them in the years to come? And if nothing, then what barriers, financial, educational, political, physical, are being erected already to shut those people out? Now, you remember I promised you two visions of the future, one sustainable, the other just. But future number two, the just future, is much harder to imagine right now because there aren't any rich and powerful interest groups rubbing our noses in it. All we have is the seeds of that just future in our hands. How do we grow them? Here's a useful framework for thinking about what it is that active citizens do. There's building the alternatives we'd like to see, defending the things we love, and challenging the things we can't stand. I don't have much time, but I'm going to give you a quick example of each of these from my own experience. First, there's building alternatives. Back in Lagos, as a beautiful counterpoint to Eco-Atlantic, a local architect has made designs for a floating village, houses buoyed by recuperated plastic materials and powered by solar panels. It's affordable, durable, smart, and fair, and will keep working when the sea level rises into the slums. They'll need support, though, to make this happen, because the Nigerian government has sided with Eco-Atlantic, the sustainable cruelty of the future, rather than the transformational hope of the present. On to defending the things we love. Well, it turns out that our Pacific neighbours aren't just waiting for Australia's coal industry to sink their islands so that they can paddle here and be locked up in our refugee camps. Instead, they're fighting back. Last year, a group calling themselves the Pacific Climate Warriors, supported by 350.org, came to Australia to stand up to the coal industry on home soil. In one memorable action, they, alongside diverse Australians, peacefully blockaded the Newcastle coal terminal in kayaks and traditional canoes, preventing thousands of tons of coal from leaving the terminal. As for challenging the things we can't stand, I'd like to highlight two strategies. One is divestment. Currently, nearly every major university, school, superannuation fund, and church in the world invests in fossil fuels. Divestment means demanding that these institutions take your money out of destroying the future and put it somewhere nice. Even Radford College, such a marvellous institution in many ways, banks with the Commonwealth Bank, Australia's leading lender to big new coal projects. It's not super easy for a school like Radford to switch to smaller, community-oriented banks like MECU or Bendigo, and Radford isn't going to bother unless their students, parents, and staff make their moral concern clear in the form of a community campaign. There are some brave students here starting one. You should get involved. Of course, stopping the things we can't stand isn't just about moving money around. It's also about challenging a system that has always pushed the points of extraction and pollution onto vulnerable people, while concentrating power around urban and global centres. So we go out to those points of extraction and support the people there to make their voices heard, sometimes by putting our bodies on the line. Right now, for example, people from across Australia are coming together to support the traditional owners of areas of central Queensland, including the Great Barrier Reef, that an Indian company, Adani, want to turn into the largest coal mining and export operation in human history. Thousands of Australians have taken a pledge to take non-violent direct action to prevent the financing and construction of these mega mines. Some would call this kind of behaviour extreme or uncalled for, but that's just twaddle. Civil disobedience or non-violent direct action has been the major driving force behind every positive social change you can probably think of. Think Gandhi's liberation of India, the civil rights movement in the United States, or the end of apartheid. Today, it's not feral hippies anymore. People have been pushed too far. We're seeing Aboriginal elders, local farmers, nurses, doctors, scientists, lawyers, priests, high school students, even a Kokoda veteran, and some guy who plays rugby a lot, taking direct action in Australia to take back control over our future. Now, these are just a few examples from my experience, and don't worry, if direct action and divestment aren't really your things, there are millions of people out there trying amazing projects to build the kind of future we want. You can find some of them on a website, Beautiful Solutions, which catalogues a lot of these. Of course, we have no idea what the just future might look like, just like you have no idea what the final scene of an improvised play will look like before you've found your cast, written the script, taken singing lessons, rehearsed, rewritten the script, had a party, and invited the audience. But if we don't start improvising, we'll be stuck with their crappy script, heading for the final scene of the Titanic, except that all the icebergs have melted, and what happens is that the ship, determined to keep growing for no humanly comprehensible reason, just collapses under its own weight. Take-home messages: let's talk climate justice, not climate action. Use the sustainable injustice test whenever you can. And things that you could do now include divesting Radford College, looking up some of these websites, only some of which are visible, or email me if you want to know more about what you can do. And I'd better wrap up. Whew. This is a lot to go over in a few minutes. But I think that the real message is, if we don't act, and I mean we, including you, all of us, if we don't act, we're going to find ourselves living in some version of Eco-Atlantic. And no matter which side of the sea walls you were on, we would not be living into our name. The system that we're a part of becomes more inhuman by the day. But the reason that we know what inhuman means is because we also understand what it means to be human. And that is something that we can live. Thank you.